now my privilege to introduce our speaker, Cynthia McGuinn of Ruda, Peter, Teachin, McGuinn. She's the president-elect of the American Board of Trial Advocates, which is ABOTA. Cynthia's trial skills in the courtroom are the envy of many attorneys, and she has a trial record to prove it. A number of her jury trials have resulted in 8-figure verdicts, and in 2015, she earned the record for the highest personal injury verdict in the history of Sonoma County. Her ability to read and connect with jurors is second to none. And she has a knack for making the most of difficult cases and making them clear so that each juror on the panel can understand them. She has a diverse client base. She's a substantial part of her representation includes prosecuting actions for surviving family members or wrongful death actions, prosecuting actions on behalf of persons sustaining personal injuries such as paraplegia, quadriplegia, and brain injuries. Cynthia was honored in 2003 as the Trial Lawyer of the Year by the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, and she has been recognized as a top woman litigator in California every year since 2005. She was the first woman president of the San Francisco chapter and is presently the president-elect of the American Board of Trial Advocates, and is a fellow of several other invitation-only organizations, such as the International Society of Barristers, the American College of Trial Lawyers, and the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. That International Academy is limited to 600 members worldwide. Cynthia is also a member of the Consumer Attorneys of California, the American Association for Justice, the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, and the Bar Association of San Francisco. While maintaining an active litigation practice, Cynthia writes, lectures, and has taught at law schools such as UC Berkeley and Harvard on the subject of trial advocacy. And when time permits, she likes to bike, dive, ski, and ride her horses. Cynthia obtained her undergraduate degree from the University of Akron in Ohio and her law degree from Gallaudet University. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia McGuinn.
So I'm the warm-up actor for the rest of the day. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Phil, for that really wonderful introduction. And I want to thank the officers and members of the Contra Costa County Bar Association for giving me the opportunity to have a conversation with all of you this morning. Yesterday, I was at lunch with a temporary law clerk that we have at our office who is awaiting the bar results, which many of you know come in today. So it's a big day for a lot of people. And I'm sure that even though a lot of us have gray hair, we remember that day pretty well. Anyway, I was talking to her. We had a birthday lunch. It was her birthday. And at our office, when we have a birthday party and we're celebrating somebody, we always ask them to provide us with words of wisdom. And I wasn't thinking we were going to get much in the way of words of wisdom. This was a 24-year-old, 25-year-old young woman, but she really surprised me. Her response was both unexpected and striking, both in its wisdom and its simplicity. And what she said to me was, I think the most important plan for me is that I act with intention in terms of what I choose to do in the law and who I choose to surround myself with in my work. If I do that, I think I will be happy. And I was thinking back to when I learned that I passed the bar, and at that point, you had to get it in the mail. I went down to the post office and waited and got it. Didn't even wait to get it delivered from the house. And I can tell you, I wasn't thinking that I wanted to have a practice where I did it with intention. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do and who I was going to work with and the kind of people I wanted to be surrounded with. I was thinking, how am I going to pay off my school bill? That's what I was thinking. But keeping her observation in mind, I want to tell you that I am very happy to be here today because in preparing for my remarks, I did a little research and learned that your bar organization is committed to the work that I've done as a lawyer for the last 30+ years, and is work that I think is essential, particularly in our current political environment and culture. in our country. With your 1,700 members, and I know some of you know these things, but I belong to several bar organizations, and I don't know everything my bar organizations do. But you folks with 1,700 members and the participation of law students and legal professionals and people in the business community demonstrate a very strong and progressive commitment to the justice system. When I looked up you online, I found that you had a standing court scholarship fund committee, a pro bono committee, and an access to justice committee. These types of committees are very important in that they share the common goal of educating the public about our system of justice and the important part that it plays in their lives, and the power that they as jurors and litigants have to sometimes set standards for the community and possibly for the country. So these committees model by the work that they do, but lawyers don't just work to do well, they also work to do good, which is somewhat the subject of my remarks this morning. Similarly, you have a judicial bias committee which provides a platform to protect the judges in your county from unfair attacks. And attacks which have become quite common locally and sadly nationally at the highest levels of our government. And these are attacks that our judges cannot defend themselves against. They have an ethical constraint that precludes them from doing that, and they are put in they have a Hobson's choice. They are put in a very bad situation. So your judicial bias committee is a very important committee. With all that being said, I feel quite honored to be here today before so many accomplished lawyers and legal professionals. And I particularly want to thank those of you who chair the committees I mentioned, or are members of it, or simply support it with either your financial contribution or your time. The title of my presentation, Ask Not What the Law Can Do for You, may be familiar to those of you that are 45 to 50 years old. It, of course, comes from the 1961 inaugural speech of John Fitzgerald Kennedy when he called on the public and each and every person in the country to do what was right for the greater good. And what he said was, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I was driving home last night after a particularly grueling and yet at the same time incredibly boring deposition, long deposition of a collateral witness that I did not notice. I was listening to Sirius Radio. It's one of my indulgences. I pay a certain amount a month to be able to tune into CNN and Fox and MSNBC and PBS. And I switch among those stations often to try to get a flavor of what's going on. When I did that last night, I felt like I was in an alternate universe. I really did. Not just for the content of the facts, the things that were being discussed that day as the news, but the way they were perceived differently on each of these stations. I really had a hard time getting my head about it. And I realized something that's been bothering me for a long time, that regardless of our respective political leanings, I think we probably all can acknowledge that there are very serious problems in our country right now. And that there's very little to be admired about in either of our two major political parties in terms of ethics or consideration of the greater good, certainly. And most troubling and most affecting us and our, quote, constituency, which are our clients, is the disregard for the rule of law, the disrespect of the judiciary, and our system of justice. And from mass shootings to allegations and evidence of pervasive sexual harassment from Hollywood to Capitol Hill, to the idiocy of the UCLA basketball players who shoplifted in China, our fellow citizens do not behave admirably, and it seems to get and be more and more accepted that that's okay. So what can we as lawyers in our profession do about it? I'm not a big person to quote people, but I do like some of the things that Mother Teresa said. And one of the things she said was, Be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. Casting it in my words, do what good you can when you can, as best you can. And that's what we have to do as lawyers. How do you do that in the context of your day-to-day practice as an attorney? Particularly in light of the way that we are perceived by society. I looked at a Pew Research study that was done in 2013 where they evaluated various professions. And of the professions evaluated, lawyers were held in the lowest regard. We were below in this order: the military, teachers, medical doctors, scientists, engineers, the clergy, artists, journalists, business executives, and us. It is noteworthy that the politicians didn't even make the list, but we were perceived very low. That means that about 1 in 5 Americans, or 18% of the population, think we contribute a lot to society, and everybody else thinks we do not. Very little or less than little. And the question is, why do they feel that way? And I'll get to that in a little while, but I want to take you back, since today is a big day for a lot of people, to what it was like when you became a lawyer. And this is more or less my story, but I suspect there's a lot of similarities to your story as well. You work hard, you get your bachelor's degree, for some reason you decide that you might like to take the LSAT. Maybe you study for it, maybe you take it more than once, maybe. Eventually, you get enough of a score that you can get into a law school. Maybe it's the one you like, maybe it's not quite the one you like, but it's one that will do. And you spend the next several years of your life learning how to think like a lawyer. The first year is terrifying, you have no idea what you're doing. The second year, you're thinking this is a lot of work and it's hard. And the third year, from time to time, you probably dial it in because you're tired. After that, you need to take a bar review course. Oh, and by the way, after that, before the bar review course, cha-ching. Bills are going up, tuition, books. Maybe you have to work, maybe you have to support a family. Maybe you need to take out loans. You study for the bar review course. You take the bar. Maybe you pass the first time, maybe you pass the second or the third, but you ultimately graduate, you get your ticket. And then all of a sudden, you realize that you've got to pay off your bills. That's what I did. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to pay off these bills? I got to pay these bills off. And my focus at the time that I went into the practice of law is, I need to do well. I did not think about needing to do good. What had I achieved? Well, I had a Juris Doctorate degree. I had the ability to think logically, to create a strategy within the context of the law that allowed me to apply tactics to obtain a favorable result for my client. And I had a big bill. I suspect that a lot of us have that same circumstance or something nearly like it. And what happened to me is that, and I'm now 35 or 36 years into the practice of law, and I did not go into law until I didn't go to law school until I was 29 years old. So I started practicing, and the way that I practice law is that I worked hard, and I thought I would work harder than everybody else. I was afraid all the time. I practiced in fear all the time. Now I went into business for myself, which in reflection probably might not have been the best idea, the best way to start. But I thought if I was better prepared, I would do well. And I did. I was very lucky in many ways. I met people that taught me a lot. I had good mentors, and I was lucky, and I did well. But I can't say that I was particularly happy for the first 10 or 12 years of my practice because I worked all the time. I viewed a holiday as an opportunity to get all the things done that I didn't get done the rest of the time. So between 1981 and 1995, I spent every Christmas day in the office. I spent every New Year's Eve in the office, every Easter, every holiday in the office working because I wanted to do well. And I found that I wasn't particularly happy and I wasn't feeling particularly rewarded. And at that time, I was invited to become a member of an organization called the American Board of Trial Advocates, which is it's a professional organization. It's by invitation, and it's equally divided between plaintiffs and defendants. And in order to become a member, at the time I did, you have to have tried 20 jury trials to verdict, and you had to have satisfactory ethical standards and be well liked in the community. I was invited to join this organization, and when I did do so, I learned that it was a service organization. It did many of the things that your organization does as well. And it has about 7,600 members. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about it in a while, but what happened when I got involved with that particular organization, and I can't say I did it with the intent that that young law clerk talked about. I was fortunate that I stumbled into it. I began to realize the satisfaction I got out of doing good as well as doing well, because that organization has a lot of educational programs. They have a teacher's law school. They have James Otis lectures where they go and they meet with high school students. We do mock jury trials. We support those kinds of things. We have a lot of programs that are for our bar itself. So we have masters in trial programs, those types of things. And in doing that, I got to know people outside my narrow circle of plaintiff's litigation. I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, that's all I've ever done. And I got to meet people in the community, I got to meet teachers, I got to learn about this world outside of myself. And amazingly, my practice did not suffer. In fact, it did better, and I was happy. So one of the things I want to talk about this morning is you can be happy and still be fulfilled and still pay your bills and do good. And the only way that we are going to change our reputation as lawyers is to do good in a way that is seen by the community, that is revealed to them in terms of what we do. So I urge you to become associated with the organizations you've been involved in, or consider being involved in. And by the way, if you thought this was going to be a how-to, it's not. I'm not going to talk about interrogatories or anything else. This is really my opportunity to talk to you about how I feel about the practice of law. And at 68 years old, looking back on my career in the past, what gave me joy? What made me sing inside? And sometimes the things that made me sing were the results. There's no question about it. I tried a case in San Francisco when they used to try cases in the old civil courthouse with a big dome. No air conditioning, middle of summer, by myself, hard case. Jury came in late in the afternoon after everybody had left. My client wasn't there. And we got a really terrific verdict. And there was nobody to tell. And I packed up my little roller bag and I'm walking down the hall on the 3rd floor, and the wheels are clicking on the marble floor, sweating under my arms, hot. And I realized when I get to the elevator, I did it. I really did it. And this young man, this 15-year-old boy, was going to be able to pursue some sort of a life, even though he was substantially injured in this case. And there I am standing in front of the elevator just air pumping myself. I was so excited. And I realized it had nothing to do with the money. It had everything to do with doing good. And that's what makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to know that I've helped some people, a family whose father and husband has died because a grocery store who shall remain unnamed gave the wrong prescription, and he took it and he died. And we got a recovery for these people, and the kids get to go to college, and I get Christmas cards when they have babies, and these are the kinds of cases, and every one of you, I am sure, have those cases. And isn't it interesting that the satisfaction you feel is equal to whether there was a big dollar amount associated with that result or not, so long as you helped somebody else and you made it better for them. And that can be true whether you're plaintiff or defense attorney. There are instances where the defendant's counsel helps do good. Sometimes it's in settling a case, and sometimes it's in winning a case that is not justified. So, kind of remind you to think about that. Why don't we get respect? Well, we always talk about doing well as opposed to talking about doing good. Honest to God, the one thing, and I have to go in my position in these various organizations, I go to a lot of legal, social functions, and there are certain organizations where everybody is going to talk about how much they settle a case for, how they trick somebody into doing something, whatever. And there are others that don't. But do you like it when you hear somebody else? Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like somebody who's not a lawyer is going to feel good if they hear this story? We need to stop talking so much about how well we're doing, and we need to start talking about what good we're doing. Talk about your programs to your clients. Explain to them that part of what you do is give back to the community. Ask them if there's anything that you can do for them that's unrelated to the actual part of their case, that there's anything else troubling them. We go into the American Board of Trial Advocates, and that's ABOTA. ABOTA goes into schools. We make ourselves available to teachers. We go to grade schools, middle schools, high schools, and we talk to the students. Teachers appreciate it, gives them something to do, gives them a little bit of a break while you're talking. And every person that you have contact with who is in the community and is not a lawyer, that sees you, sees me, sees you as a human being that cares about them, that has an appreciation or an understanding of what's going on in their world, suddenly you're no longer just a lawyer. You're no longer a faceless name of a profession. You're a person, and they know that you care. And talk about why you're proud of what you do. I don't think we do enough pro bono work. I know I don't. And we do a fair amount, but we don't do enough. So when you have that opportunity, if you're a sole practitioner, I know it's much harder. If you're with a firm, you might talk to your partners, the people you work with, about coming up with a certain percentage of cases that you're going to do pro bono. Questionable advertising. I just want to stab myself in the head. I was watching television last night. I got home and was having some soup and trying to relax. And they had a big ad on about the fires, you know. And I had just come back from a social gathering with a bunch of lawyers where several were talking about how many fire cases they have. Well, I have 100, and I have 20, and I have 10. Well, you have 10. Do you want a partner? Do you want to give us 50? And I felt like I was at, I don't know, I felt like I was at an auction. It was a very uncomfortable feeling for me. I looked at the ad on television that implied there had already been a finding of legal responsibility, which there has not. There very well may be soon, but there has not been yet. But it was being represented by the attorney that is so. That's unethical. And when you obtain a client that way, when these people obtain clients that way and they then cannot demonstrate it's true, they lose the client's faith. And the clients think less of lawyers. All of us, not just the lawyers that they deal with. Not speaking out. I'm really ashamed to say that there are times where I knew something should be addressed, and I used a lot of excuses. I used to use the excuse of, well, I'm a woman, so I'm probably not going to have as much power. I'm going to find a man to go talk about that issue. And I did that quite often. But it was a coward's way of addressing it. Issues that are in dispute, whether they be sexual harassment or gender bias issues or whatever, you have to be able to stand up and say your piece and be okay with it and be brave about it. And My mea culpa is, it took me a long time before I did that. I did not start doing that until about 10 years ago. And what a great feeling it is to do so. And then lastly, not supporting your bar or the citizens that you work for. So, practically speaking, what wisdom, if any, can I give you? As folks here this morning, since I'm kind of the warm-up act for the good stuff that comes later, one, spend as much time as you can doing good as doing well. And in the context of your daily practice, try to, I'm going to say model, because that's what I do now, traits of great trial lawyers. And this is my list of great trial lawyer traits. And I want you to know, by the way, great trial lawyers are not necessarily trial lawyers who win huge cases, do class actions, own private jets, are always in the news. Some of the best trial lawyers that I know were sole practitioners who had a very small client base, lived in a very small house in the East Bay, raised a family. But these are the traits. One, they're all curious, flexible, and resilient. It's really interesting to me. When I get a motion for summary judgment, I go, oh God, a motion for summary judgment. My older partner, our senior partner, his name's John Ruda, he gets a motion for summary judgment, and he's now 83. And he just settled a case a couple days ago for $2 million. He's slowing down, he's not trying cases anymore, but he's still involved. But when he gets a motion for summary judgment, he comes into my office, he's almost gleeful, sits down in a chair and says, I just got a motion for summary judgment, and these issues are so interesting. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? But he's curious, and he views it as, okay, this is a free opportunity for me to see what I might be facing at trial and to address it while discovery's still open, while I still have an opportunity to do it. Flexible and resilient. I'm not a terribly flexible person. I think I'm pretty resilient, but not necessarily flexible. And being able to address difficult issues with your opponent in a civil and, I'm not going to say pleasant, but civil and perhaps somewhat humorous manner, I learned after quite a while, resulted in better results in terms of my communication with people. Resiliency, I just argued a motion down in Santa Clara a couple months ago on a complex matter that doesn't need to be described, but the situation was this. I was very anxious about it because it was a terminating motion in a case that I had several $100,000 in costs in, so it was serious for me. And I was so anxious that I had my first ever disassociative event. I'm arguing my position, and all of a sudden I get a flush, and my heart starts beating really hard, and the next thing I know, the real Cynthia is over here, and she's looking at the one arguing the motion, and the real Cynthia is saying, I think she's doing okay, so I probably can take care of the heart thing, and maybe I can get my heart under control. She seems to be doing okay. The other lawyer does not look at her funny. The judge is not looking at her funny. I'm going to let her go. And I could hear myself talking. I had made myself so anxious that I literally disassociated from my own body. Now, I have tried a lot of cases, and a lot of complex cases, and a lot of important cases, but this particular case had to do with I stand to lose several $100,000 that I have to talk to my partners about, and it really got me. And in that instance, my, quote, lack of curiosity, flexibility, and resilience resulted in something that was unhealthy for me. Having a dissociative event is not healthy, okay? So the lawyers that can do that can do things humorously, that can do things civilly, I think are great trial lawyers. They understand it's their client's case. How many times have I talked to lawyers and I'll say, well, what does your client want? Lawyers that work in my office. Well, it doesn't matter. I've got client control. Really? It's always your client's case. You always have to keep the client involved. They recognize they do not control the outcome, They can only hope to shape it. Here's a big one. They develop a genuine relationship with their client. And it's one that starts right when they first meet them and continues on and develops, and sometimes it changes. But that relationship contemplates a clear understanding of what is important to the client and what the client wants and needs to be successful in whatever their problem is. It's just as important as winning. I had a case once that involved a fire in a truck where a man had taken his son with him. He was a long-haul truck driver, and there was an explosion, and the little boy burned to death in the truck. And it was a products liability case. And in settling the case, the mother seemed to be, it was a very good settlement, and I thought, well, this is a great settlement, and I talked to her about it, and she seemed to be ambivalent about it. It was like, yeah, okay. And I finally said to her, I don't understand, what is it that I haven't done for you? And she said, well, you never asked me what was important to me. I want a bench for my child, and I want his name on it, and I want it at his school, and I want them to pay for it. I said, well, we can take the money out of the settlement. She said, no, I want them to pay for it, in addition to that. So I didn't hear my client. I didn't pay attention. I never did it again because it was it was just so obvious to me, I completely checked out. Wonderful trial lawyers are fierce advocates and hard workers, but they're also civil and ethical. And you know, ABOTA has a program called Civility Matters. Has any of you ever heard of it? If you have, it's really a great program. If they haven't presented it to your bar association and you would like them to do it, I'm sure they would have some folks come over and do it. It's short, it's interesting, it's fun. They've got clips of circumstances where lawyers weren't civil and what the consequences were. I would recommend you consider that. And civility is better than it was probably when I was in my 30s. It was pretty horrible then. It really was. And it's getting better. But if we don't model civil behavior in the way we interact with one another in our litigation, and particularly at trial, a jury sees it. And they just say, they'll make a decision, and if you know, you're probably do okay, but they will think less of you, and they will think less of the profession. It's really interesting, they hardly ever think less of the judge, regardless of what the judge does. But they do think less of the lawyers. So when you are in front of a group of anybody, whether it's jurors or prospective jurors, or you're at a social gathering, if you are uncivil or talk poorly about your opponent, the reflection is going to be, oh, it's just the lawyers, that's the way they are. Good trial lawyers treat everybody with respect. They have a strong, heartfelt belief in the value of the jury system. You know, ABOTA's mission, its constitution, its reason for being is protection and preservation of the right to trial by jury. That's its primary mission statement. And we do that a lot of different ways. But if ever there was a time when we need juries, it's definitely now. And when you have a jury pool that doesn't care about what they're doing, don't want to be there, don't understand the value, then they're not going to participate fully. It's really interesting. I don't know if you've had this experience. Most of you have tried cases at some point. True? Yeah. So you get a jury and they're like, you're thinking to yourself, man, they don't care, they don't want to be here, and they're not going to do a very good job. But once they take the oath, and once it starts, it has been my consistent experience every time that they really buckle down and do a good job and they care about what they're doing. And when they're done, at least in my experience, all of the jurors that I've dealt with have gone away with at least they've expressed the opinion that they liked what they did and they thought it was important. And that's that do what good you can when you can as often as you can. And then of course you support the system and your organizations actively, both by your money and your your actual participation. And my experience is most lawyers are extremely generous that way. And in fact, whenever I have to go, and I have to go often to ask for money, I'm always surprised to find that sometimes it's the sole practitioners that give me the largest sums relative to their capacity to do so. And what that tells me is, I'm glad I was a sole practitioner when I started. I'm glad my dad was a mailman and my mom cleaned houses. I got to understand what Warren Hatch said yesterday before he shortly came close to fisticuffs with the guy from Ohio, Sherrod. I came from a poor background. And by the way, when I'm talking about civility, how about that interaction? These are senators of the United States almost coming to fisticuffs. I mean, frightening. It's really frightening. 10 Commandments. I will leave you with 10 Commandments, and I hope I haven't bored you too much. 1, you can be adversarial, objective, friendly, and civil all at the same time. 2, the other side is not the enemy. They are simply the opponent. 3 is the big one. Always, always, always tell the truth. Even when you probably wouldn't have to. Even when nobody wouldn't know. Because the one thing you're going to walk away with, or at least I hope I walk away with when they put me in a box or whatever they're going to do with me, is that I still have my reputation. It is the most important thing you will ever have as an attorney, and if it's marred, lost, it's almost impossible to get back. Keeping in mind, always, always, always tell the truth. Commandment number 4 is, do not expect or depend on others to reciprocate in kind. Because if you do, you will be very, very disappointed. Defense lawyer friend of mine gave me what I call my number 5 commandment. There is no such thing as a justice computer. One can do it all right and still lose. Okay? And I've had that happen more with the court than with the jury, but it hurts all the same. It doesn't matter. I think it's inherent. Certainly if you're a trial lawyer, you don't want to lose. You'd like to do just about anything you could to win. Big one for me. Number 6. Sometimes your destiny will be controlled by a jerk. Very true. I swear to God, it is so true. It could be your medical expert who doesn't bother to prepare, even though you've paid him or her a lot of money. It can be the bailiff, it can be the clerk, it can be your court reporter at trial who is busily typing away for 2.5 months as you're there, and at the end when the case goes on appeal, you find out that they were an alcoholic and they never took down a word. Not a word. So what? Had to agree on what the text was going to be of the trial. Number 7. It's about the client, it's always about the client. Number 8, there are circumstances in which a client is better served by turning a case down. I'm going to repeat that. There are circumstances in which a client is better served when you turn the case down and you tell them why. You tell them the truth. The busier I get, the harder it is for me to take the time to explain to somebody I'm not going to take their case and why. For a while, I thought I found it easier to just say, well, I'm too busy right now, so I'm going to refer you to so-and-so. It was disrespectful to the person I was referring them to, and it was very disrespectful to the client. I go on the presumption that the client is coming to see me because they want to know. And if they're unhappy and they don't like it, that's the price I have to pay for about 10 minutes while they express that opinion and they go on their way after I've told them about the statutes. I mean, that's just the way it is. It is disrespectful not to tell the client why you're not going to take their case. Number 9, have friends and activities outside of law. You heard about all those things they read at the end of that very long introduction, some of which was true, and some of which probably wasn't. You get a lot of possessions. I have 2 horses. I have 2 bikes. I have diving equipment. Well, for 22 years of my practice, I couldn't use any of it. all right? I didn't balance my life in many ways. I made choices that allowed me to do well, but not have a full life. So if I could impart anything that you might want to think about when you leave here, because I read about keynote speeches and they're supposed to be inspirational, so this is my stab at it, you guys. Think about, are you happy in what you're doing? Do you have that moment of joy? You should have, I operate on the 2/3, 1/3 rule because I'm Catholic. So I figure I can be 2/3 not happy, but I gotta have 1/3 happy of my life. 1/3 of the time I have to be happy. So think about what it is you do that makes you happy outside the law, and think about what you want to do that you're not doing now, and try to figure out a way to balance that a bit. And the last, number 10, for me, is the most important, and that is, please remember that jury trial work is a lifelong exercise in humility. It really is. I speak from experience. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I appreciate it.